You're listening to How to Stan, the podcast all about both specific fandoms and fandom culture as a whole. For more information about the show and the other show that I do, 17 Karat K-Pop, visit 17karatkpop.weebly.com. You can also go to 17karatkpop.weebly.com/howtostan for more specific information about this podcast. Enjoy the show. In a very revealing poll from Ipsos, 17% of Americans said they believe they have seen a UFO before. Approximately 33% of Americans believe that aliens have visited Earth at some point. 45% agreed with the statement, UFOs exist and have visited the Earth. 57% agreed with the statement, there is intelligent life and civilization on other planets. 66% said for sure there is life on other planets. And 60% of Americans think the government is hiding something when it comes to how much they know about life on other planets. Although these stats indicate the feelings of less than the majority of Americans, they are held by a substantial amount, and therefore it is worth understanding why they believe that. Especially because as much as UFO culture has infiltrated the United States pop culture, that pop culture landscape is not just exclusive to the United States. In fact, there are UFO research centers housed in Denmark, Australia, Canada, Sweden, Greece, and the UK. And data collection methods vary among those agencies, as well as even just the interpretations of alleged alien abductions and UFO encounters. That is looked into differently in other countries. And so quantitatively and qualitatively, the way different countries handle this, it speaks to the larger point of this whole series of episodes I've done on ufology. A lot of people are heavily invested in it in so many ways. This is not a topic that is actually a surface level thing you can understand. You really got to dig deep to understand the myriad reasons why people are into this, why they believe this, why this is such a prominent role in many people's lives around the world. Especially when thinking about how pop culture is just rampant with these recurring references showing that the mystery continues decade after decade. From quotes like Beam Me Up Scotty that are just super well known, to movie references, The Da Vinci Code, Independence Day, even Keeping Up with the Kardashians had a segment on Area 51. Political figures have also weighed in on this issue. Bill Clinton has expressed interest before in what is out there in the world, and President Obama actually became the first president to reference Area 51 publicly. So very prominent influential figures have even gotten in on this. It is not the fringe belief that you may have been led to think it was. George Knapp said in 2014, quote, "In Copenhagen, for years after the story broke, it was a burning priority for me to try to convince the public and my skeptical colleagues that the story was legitimate and true. Not anymore. These days, I focus on explaining why we took the story seriously in the first place, why we put our credibility on the line, and how the tale subsequently took on a life that no one could have imagined. People have totally viewed anything to do with talking about seeing an alien or a UFO as, you're just one of those crazy people, what are you talking about, why are you jumping to conspiracy thinking?" And George Knapp is basically saying that was part of the point. Why this craving for information has been fed over time in small bits and pieces to keep you coming back for more and continue to ask why. And he's helped perpetuate follow-up questions by saying, here's another story for you to go wild theorizing over. Basically, he's answering questions with more questions. Brings me to my main point about this whole culture surrounding the fascination with aliens, UFOs, all things outer space. People love the mystery. So in the spirit of ufology and what it's all about, the secrecy and the intrigue, rather than try to say, I believe in aliens or not, and try to prove or disprove these people, I want to just look at why they think that. Why they think that stuff is out there, or why they like to act like they do. Or just find interest in the stories of people who act like they do. What is with the fascination? And I'm going to break it down in 4 key explanations. Source 1 of the intrigue is just the science fiction genre as a whole. It stirs up these possibilities in people's minds of alternative universes where things are different and poses an endless stream of what-if questions. Celebrity endorsements to the sci-fi genre, of course, have helped too. Elon Musk, in particular, has helped with that, with his, not just when he pitches ideas like colonizing Mars and things like that, but also he credits books like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So the people that these guys look up to are people who didn't have all the answers. That's not why they looked up to them. They looked up to the people who had all the questions. A second source of intrigue comes from the frequent invoking of religious affiliations to this cause. The frequent application of religious terminology and symbols and ceremonies to alien believer communities. Some believe that these fallen angels, as they call them, are actually sinners, aliens putting back on Earth. Others believe that the Bible provides context for how early aliens actually visited Earth, centuries before recorded dates by ufologists. George Adamski's book called Flying Saucers Farewell applies these biblical passages to his view. The fiery chariots, as they're described in the Bible, were references to alien spaceships. And he is not alone in that belief. Which at the end of the day goes back to the need for belonging. If you're not going to go attend regular church, maybe you want to feel like you're a part of a bigger picture and something different, something bigger than yourself, through aliens. I think it's summed up best by a quote from a Rolling Stone piece looking at the impact of UFO culture. Quote, "Church attendance in America is down to 50%, the lowest in history. Everyone needs something to believe in. If it's not going to be JC, referring to Jesus Christ, it might as well be E.T., unquote. If it's not going to be JC, it might as well be E.T. While not directly referencing that quote, but referencing a similar concept, alien believers do often express this sense of humility about it. There are those who are like the Elon Musks of their groups and are quite confident in their abilities, but there are others who see their alien belief as a humbling experience because it reminds them that they are not the masters of the universe. There's something bigger than them that is calling the shots, and they are just pieces in the puzzle of life, just chess pieces on the game of life, or whatever analogy you want to use to describe how each human individually needs to see themselves as a small part of a bigger picture to stay grounded. Ironically, these believers have taken their interest in outer space to a new level to stay down to earth. There's also a psychological component here sometimes, like filmmaker Jonathan Berman, who directed George Van Tassel's life documentary. Remember, he's the character we talked about who built the Integratron because he thought it was his life's mission to, after an alien sent him a message requesting he build it. He said about Van Tassel, quote, "He was representative of the generation of men who came back from World War II seeking answers in an alternative form of spirituality," unquote. If you think this all seems really just out there, like how could you ever pivot from biblical beliefs to alien beliefs and make that connection, think about the wellness community nowadays. The whole world of Goop and other brands that have this similar ethos of, look, the mainstream way of doing things is not working for you. Don't you want something that's kind of against the grain, countercultural, or whatever you want to call it? Alternative is the key word for all of this. If the status quo isn't working for you, let's try something that's really quite different. And the wellness industry similarly can profit off of that sense of doubt if the traditional or viewed as the most mainstreamed, acceptable socially way of doing things or treating a medical issue or things like that aren't working for you. They propose a new way of positioning and framing it, even if it's largely the same thing they've been marketing for years. They've rebranded it for this new era. So wellness influencers online are a key example that you can compare to those who espouse other beliefs that leave some people feeling like that's all a bunch of nonsense. But no matter what it is you believe in, it's something, and it's something you can turn to feel better. There is that urge some people have to figure out how to improve their lives and pick up the pieces, whether it's because of PTSD from a war or some other traumatic event you went through. Whatever the case may be, when you're down on your luck and you need some sort of outlet for feeling spiritually, emotionally healed, anything is better than nothing. And if you are just subconsciously desperate for a new direction to take your thoughts and behaviors and way of looking at the world and changing your beliefs, you're going to take that opportunity. Which ties into Reason 3 for this interest: a general desire to be a part of a world much bigger than ourselves. That humility is really important to people, especially with the climate crisis we are living through now. When the future seems so up in the air and dangerous, there's so many natural disasters that are getting more frequent. People have more of an end of the world feeling, especially with the dystopian time we're living in with this pandemic right now. That is increasing distrust of governments to take care of people, and mix that distrust with, in general, a feeling of being let down by the system, as they call it. So conspiracy-mindedness rises when we're living in turbulent times, and people want answers more than ever, and norms are all upended, so it's like, why not upend my beliefs as well? So I think what keeps people motivated and not just succumbing to the guilt of thinking that we're leaving behind a terribly destroyed planet is the reminder that there is still a bit of time, not to reverse all of climate change, of course, but to save the world, basically, with the guidance of some sort of higher power. And for these people, that takes the form of aliens who they believe are messengers warning us, hey, stop ruining your planet, or we won't let you into ours. Whatever image people channel in their minds to remind them of leaving this planet a good place for generations after them, they are needing that voice in their heads to remind them, hey, this is your conscience speaking here. We need to leave this planet alive and sustainable. And that reminder really can come into people's minds more sharply when they feel like someone's watching them, in a sense. Someone is out there making sure you are having good karma. You are doing what you need to do to stay a good person or face the consequences. And part of that is protecting the land we live on. There are some more overtly psychological reasons for a belief in aliens as well. There are things that happen like the airship effect, which occurs when a group of unrelated lights in the sky shows up and your brain interprets those as being part of a group, even if they are not related to each other in any way. Some psychologists speculate that some alleged UFO encounters are due to hallucinations or sleep deprivation, sleep paralysis, other sleep conditions when you are half awake and your mind is running wild. Richard J. McNeely, Harvard psychologist, said, quote, "The alien abduction phenomenon, in my opinion, shows how sincere, non-psychotic individuals can develop beliefs about and false memories of incredible experiences that never happened," unquote. Like we just discussed, trauma can also play a role in the psychological reasons for this belief. What is often cited as an answer to the questions raised by Betty and Barney Hill when they allegedly encountered aliens was that happened in the civil rights era. 1964, there was a lot of unrest, and they were a biracial couple. So living in that perpetual state of fear that the human body and mind was just not created to sustain for that long period of time, that fight or flight instinct, that sense that the world is out to get you and the streets are not safe for you as a couple, that trauma really can affect sleep, and sleep disorders can affect these alleged alien encounters. Visually, there are things like the airship effect where you see patterns where there are none, but that's also just a psychological activity that can happen too, often as a coping mechanism, especially when people have memory gaps. Our brains automatically want to fill those gaps with something. And so if you've seen something before, that familiar imagery will come into the picture to fill gaps in your current memory. So for example, let's say you have a night where you get into a coma or something, you're knocked unconscious, and during that time, or right before that time, you saw a light in the sky. It could have been an airplane, it could have been whatever, it doesn't really matter. But your brain automatically wants to fill in the gap, and so it just uses whatever memory is available and amplifies it and really just magnifies the impact of it. So now all of a sudden the little light you might have seen for a split second becomes a prominent memory, like it was really big, and now you're remembering it as if that light was following you, or it was huge, or it was a part of a display, a formation of lights in the sky that formed some sort of spaceship or something. It takes on a life of its own when there's nothing else there in your memory. The psychologist Christopher French, who specializes in human experiences related to all things paranormal, said, quote, "What we see here, especially in under less than ideal observational conditions, can be heavily influenced by our prior beliefs and expectations, unquote. Bottom line, it's a lot harder to stop believing something than it is to start believing in it. So if you are an alien believer or a UFO believer, it's probably a lot harder to stop believing than it was to start believing. Because once you believe you've seen that, then you're more likely to believe the second time and the third time and so on that you've seen it again. Because of that memory that you have. So in addition to the interest in sci-fi, religion, the whole concept of trauma and living through periods of historic transition, all of those human needs that may fuel this belief, in addition to all of that, what comes into play is just wanting to be right. We all want to be right. We don't like being told that we're wrong, and people really like to believe they have a unique, special memory to share with people, and a special story to share with people. And it's good to do that. It's easy to do that when we're talking about the government, because people just say the government or society very often and don't specify. So when you blame something that large, no one can disprove it because it's hard to prove. So when it can't be proven but it can't be disproven, those types of beliefs empower people who want to feel like they know something you don't. Or that they know who in government or who in society knows something that no one else does. They want to have access to the insiders or feel like they do. And there is a genuine level of secrecy there, and so if you are more conspiratorially minded, more prone to believe some of this stuff, then you're also probably predisposed to exploiting the genuine reasons for privacy in government actions. What I mean is that if you are conspiratorially minded or just prone in some way, shape, or form, psychologically, culturally, whatever, you have been directed to believe in aliens and UFOs, and you think the government is hiding some of that information, and then the government does hide that information, you draw that correlation in your head saying they must be hiding something, and don't keep in mind when government transparency is not supposed to be there, when some information is supposed to stay classified. Anytime anything is kept private, you may think that must be a cover-up, when that's not always the case. It's a weird, complex situation to discuss when it comes to government transparency, and those who work on secret government projects often can't tell anyone about them. Not even their spouses. They can't say what they're into, what they're researching currently. They can't discuss pending cases with a single soul. After all, people like Luis Elizondo, who we talked about earlier, he couldn't discuss certain topics after becoming ex-military intelligence. They banned him from speaking on some stuff. Secrecy was just a part of the job for Bob Lazar, who would be flown in to this base while he was working there, traveling in unmarked vehicles to get there. Bob Lazar actually ended up taking a polygraph test once, and it was deemed inconclusive because he seemed too afraid during the test for the results to be validated, but he eventually passed the second polygraph. And here's where it gets extra weird. When the second polygraph test came out saying that Bob Lazar was fully speaking the truth about his encounters, which just means that the lie detector showed he truly believes that happened, not that it did, but that he believes he's telling the truth, then suddenly those polygraph results were allegedly stolen and no one could find them. Similarly, George Knapp claims that some people who were willing originally to speak on the record to corroborate Bob Lazar's stories suddenly pulled out after threats. There are other instances, too, where someone says they're going to leak government documents surrounding alien and UFO knowledge, and then they say they were threatened, or their data was stolen, or something like that. There is safety in numbers in these beliefs. When more and more people started coming out offering their corroborations of Bob Lazar's stories, that suddenly put together a story that seemed more believable, because on its own, each individual corroboration felt like whatever, but then when it was all together, it felt like actually substantial enough to look at. So it's the mix of people deciding to all stand up and prove their safety in numbers with revealing this stuff, mixed with this desire to know why someone was allegedly messing with documents and things like that. All the elements here are of a crime movie or TV show, and so that leads to people wanting to know what injustice is happening, even if it's just natural lack of transparency. But that's where it gets extra tricky, because when you have claims of having your data taken from you and things like that, then that really, really blurs the lines even more, if not totally just cause those lines to be redrawn entirely, surrounding what is legitimate government protection of information versus public information. What should be public knowledge? Some would say, well, if we know more about UFOs and aliens, what does that hurt anyone? Why not be more transparent? But you never know where that leads. Some people truly do have a religious level of belief in this stuff. And so if some of their beliefs are confirmed, we don't know what the fallout will be for that. So ironically, the confusion surrounding alien believers and ufologists and what they really want and what their answers they're seeking are, ironically, people may fear giving them the answers will actually, we don't know what that will bring. We actually will have more questions after we give them the answers. What do you do if a significant portion of the population feels like the ground is pulled out from under them because they realize there are no aliens, or the opposite? They feel emboldened. What does that mean? Is there a raid on Area 51? Does that provoke a rapid expansion of religious-type institutions for people who want to study ufology? Does it cause those places to shut down and lack funding, or the opposite? All of the ramifications could be huge, and the fact that we have no idea what those ramifications would be is probably part of the reason why they don't want it revealed, because they're not prepared for what could happen. But that hesitancy to open up is easily, quickly taken as personal, like they are scared of us specifically, or they specifically want to hide something from us, as opposed to it being maybe not trying to get away from you, but just in general looking at it from a macro perspective and not specifically you and what your group of believers thought or were going to do. It's about the macro level consequences of that revelation coming to light. So it's not really them trying to silence you, it's concern about what to do with information is the bottom line. One event that may provide a bit of a teaser, though, about what would have happened with more transparency is the fact that what was dubbed the UFO movement, the decades with the most UFO sightings, by the late 1960s, that quote-unquote UFO movement was considered to have died out after man walked on the moon. This I bring up and find interesting because once men walked on the moon, it felt like we could go to the moon, we could go to outer space. And so it led to a bit of disillusionment with this UFO movement, with this constant reporting of UFOs. Maybe their attention spans subconsciously dropped towards this whole culture of UFOs because they had seen outer space. They had seen we can go there. We're not prevented from going there. The aliens aren't stopping us. It's not what they thought it was. And so getting even a taste of what the alien world, so to speak, was like, led people to feel like, okay, satisfied, curiosity satisfied. That's just one possible explanation for the death of the UFO movement, as they call it. Which proves that the sustainability of these believers comes from more new questions continuously being added. The goalposts keep moving. And when a goalpost moves, like saying, look, maybe we'll stop believing when someone goes to the moon and sees no aliens, and proves that humans can go there. For some people, then when that happens, they say, never mind, that doesn't count, there's still aliens out there. Once we go to this planet, we'll see that. And they push back the goalpost, while others grow disillusioned with the movement and decide to be done with it. And so that was an interesting moment for that. Rather than see religious undertones being applied to ufology as fulfilling a source of people's sense of community, I view it as them actually taking the more personal need for religious fulfillment. Not the part of religion that helps people by having that community, but that helps them individually feel like they have the answers. And I would say that because UFO fans, alien believers, all of them, they don't get along. They really don't. There are a lot of sub-factions and friction between and among subcategories of believers, partly due to differing interpretations of the Bible and different types of religious text being applied to this, and debates around when did they first visit Earth. There are a lot of questions there, and that leads to spirited debates that can turn ugly. Ironically, the UFO community's phrase is, "We are not alone." That's their signature phrase, referring to we are not alone on Earth, but when just looking at the fandom, they are certainly on their own islands. There are a lot of moments of camaraderie, like the Storm Area 51 event attendees. They seem to enjoy each other's company. There are buses full of tourists who go out to the desert every year to try to spot aliens and UFOs where they have allegedly been seen before. People have traveled towards Area 51 as close as they can get. There are conventions like the Exopolitics Denmark Conference, which is a yearly event where people from all over the world come. George Knapp, who is investigating these encounters, says he used to get over 800 emails a day. One man actually flew from Australia to plead with George Knapp in person to tell him that aliens need to leave him alone. Fellow ufologists have called him a fraud, but the point is that he's generated a huge reaction from people who are very emotionally invested in his reporting and can share that reporting and discuss it with others. So in those senses, ufologists may feel like a community. After all, Tom DeLonge said, quote, "We should probably start treating each other more kindly and start working together to clean this place up. That's what my goal is. My goal is that by 1 or 2 generations from now, we figured this out and we stopped the tribal warfare that we've been locked in for so long," unquote. Speaking to the fact that he believes aliens are basically helping us remember that we have one shared planet that we need to clean up together. But then again, George Knapp said, quote, "There's no other movement better of devouring their own than the UFO movement, than the UFO community. The government doesn't even need to do it. We do it ourselves," unquote. There are rampant sources of infighting. For example, The Chariot of the Gods is a book that argues that UFOs have been here since the beginning of time. And that book has sold over 67 million copies. But others insist that that is not accurate, and the timeline is a cause of frustration among fans. All of this is to say, maybe it's a sense of just wanting to know and loving that curiosity. Maybe it's a sense of having a spirited book club type of debate with others that sometimes gets extra intense, but some people love that atmosphere that is confrontational. Sometimes it's about the conventions and fun events and the more light side of the fandom that taps into just pop culture interests and things like that. Maybe it's a sense of belonging in the community, just knowing mainstream culture references. Then sometimes it's the opposite, an interest in being part of a countercultural force in society. It's a sense of feeling like you have insider government information. It could just all be psychological, and this is all a coping mechanism to think about other worlds while our world is literally burning. The belief in UFOs and aliens and all things out of this world is very multifaceted. It has roots in history, in culture, in sociology, in psychology, in religious needs, a need for some sort of spiritual force mixed with the influence of pop culture, famous political figures and celebrities. And no matter which angle you look at this through, the bottom line is this. Ufology is all about a search for meaning. Emphasis on both the word search and meaning, actually. It's about the journey, not the destination. It's about the mystery, the continued intrigue, and theorizing over what's really out there. It's not as much about actually finding the solutions, but just the possibilities. That sense of the unknown excites some people. And it's a humble sense for meaning, thinking, okay, humans, we cannot be on this earth alone. There's way too much else probably on this planet. Let's not think too highly of ourselves. We are not the masters of the universe. Let's figure out who else is out there. While both of these reasons explain why some people are into this stuff, they also help explain why some people are not, and view it all as just crazy talk. Because the very reasons why people are into ufology are the very same reasons other people are trying to stay away from that topic. Think about it. The unknowns, change, the possibility, and the thought of feeling like you are just a minuscule part of a bigger universe. To some people, those thoughts to sit with are very exciting and interesting and thought-provoking, and for others, those thoughts are terrifying. We don't want to think that we are small and insignificant in the grand scheme of life, nor do we want to think that there are reasons to be paranoid about some sort of secret program and aliens and things like that. Nor do we want to stay in this perpetual state of confusion and feeling like we don't have the answers. So if the majority of Americans and people around the world are not ufologists, it's still so important to keep in mind these many factors that have culminated into some people's fixation on this stuff. Because at the end of the day, the root sources of their fixation are super understandable and relatable. We all have these human needs for outlets to ask questions, to talk to and communicate with others, even outlets to have debates and get tense with people. it's all about the human experience, and this is the way some people are living that. I would like to be very clear that the past 3 episodes on ufology in no way endorse doing things like storming Area 51 or trespassing or doing other illegal things or using this psychology about false memories to do anything that would further victimize anyone. But I'm just trying to explain how I think some people think some things happened when they didn't in this specific context. At the same time, we're talking about fandoms, what it means to be in a fandom. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that these episodes are kind of just an opening, just a tool, a foundation to build off of, to better understand people when you're wondering why do they think that. So don't treat anything I've said as the end-all be-all conclusion. These are just the many reasons why people are into this cause, yet at the same time, the same different multifaceted approach ought to be used when understanding why people are into anything. And fandoms are a useful example often. We are going to talk more about what the show is all about, why people are into what they are, and what is it that they're so into, and what do they believe, next week on the show with a brand new theme that I will keep secret for now. If you want further reading and research materials on ufology and people I've talked about, I will include a ton of links on my weekly newsletter this week. Thank you all for listening to How to Stand today, and I will talk to you all soon.